Alright, folks. How's it going? Today you have a really tired and sleepy Levitate. Yeah, and what I'm going to talk about today is my master chain and how to use it. If you have grabbed any of my project files, then you will see the master chain at the end of the mix and master file. And this is how I set it up per song. I think it works for a lot of songs, most that I've done for commission master jobs. And it should work for you. And maybe tweak it, fuck with it how you like. But if your mix down is dynamic and your mix down is clean, this should be a good jumping off point for some pretty hi-fi mastering, in the box mastering. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into this. Here we go. Here's Ableton, and I have the project file for You Have No Idea, a sound design heavy song I dropped about 2 months ago. And bear with me during the little pops and CPU clicks, because this is a fully, keep in mind, this is a fully mixed and mastered song, and therefore my computer is kind of doing the most right now, but it should run okay. So here we go. The song sounds like this during its, what I would always recommend doing is pick a point in the song, where you have kind of like the where you have the kind of archetype of the whole song. Pick a point in the song where you have the general idea of the song, like all the important instruments are present if you have a point like that. And then pick a part of the song that is very loud, that you know is going to be flexing on the limiter, and also pick a part of the song that is the focus, obviously. So I have this part at the end where it's kind of like D&B. It's like a polyrhythmic version of drum and bass, or not even. It is polyrhythmic, but it's more like a dotted note, simple, weird beat version of drum and bass. And there's a lot going on, and it sounds like this. Let me turn the entire master chain off. And by the way, expect clipping here, just a little bit though, but mainly with the kicks and snares. So here we go. Luckily enough, there was no clipping there. I think it's because I adjusted everything to have just the kick and snare hit at 0, and they're just below 0. So I'll give it up, I'll bring it up so you can hear it better, and so there's a little bit of digital clipping going on. So that's essentially what my mix down sounds like, just raw. When I mix, I mix at like a solid volume, around the volume of loud speaking, like a loud conversation, not too loud. And I, just shoot for clarity, and I shoot for how I want things to sound if they were as clear as possible. And I also give the kick and snare a lot more priority than you think you should, and a lot more dynamics than you think you should. I go way more dynamic with my mix than anything, because I geared up for this master chain here. So the very first thing I do is there's logic behind all of this. Maybe some things are a little bit unconventional, but there is some logic behind why I do what I do. Because what I'm really shooting for is kind of like, how do I put it? Uncontained. Like, I don't like glue that much in my mix and master. So what I do is I start with a very light multi-band compressor. And the reason I do this is so if there's any instances where altogether these bands go, they overwhelm in volume, or they overwhelm in, like just general presence and frequency peaks, this will kind of tame that a little bit. But keep in mind, I never use a ratio above 2.4. to 1. So here we go. I use Ozone's multi-band compressor, and I start at the lowest band, and these are generally my settings: 51 milliseconds, 128 milliseconds for attack and release. You have these same settings on all of the mix and master files that I have given you on Patreon. So it's pretty much there if you forget these numbers. But so I start with the lowest band on this preset that I have, and then I fine tune where I hear the sub to be. And with this song, it was around 100 hertz. So the sub sounds like this. See, I'm not hearing any of the mids, any of the like thumps. I'm not hearing any of that. I'm just hearing pure bass there. And then I bring down the threshold with these settings just to where, like, if you have done your mix down properly, in my opinion, subjectively, with your kick, the sub from the kick should be peaking above your sub. And so you can see that, and I bring the threshold down to right where the sub stops and the kick begins. And you can see that every single time the sub is holding a note, it kind of retains at that level at 19.6, and the kick shoots above it. So moving on to the mid-low, same exact mentality, except for I refined it to only the thumpy shit to about here. Now, I'm sure you're noticing immediately that I'm compressing it a bit more than the low end, because I very, very much like my low end to be very uncompressed. I'm only trying to shape the punch of the kick there. Therefore you have that slow attack is 50 milliseconds. I have an equally slow attack on my mid-lows, but overall I'm trying to squash it a little bit more. Also with this song, there was a shitload of mid-low, as you could probably hear in the mix down. So I had to contain that quite a bit. Same concept usually, but in this case I contained it a little bit more, so I brought it down a little bit lower. And these numbers right here for attack and release are the ones that sounded the best to me after a lot of experimentation, just with my palette. All right, moving on to the mid highs. Same exact thing. I just get the same preset with these numbers. You know, with this case, this was an exception with the attack. Usually the attack would be shorter, but because of the sound of this snare, I wanted more of that like clap to come through. I needed it actually in this song to really sound present. So I gave a little bit more attack than I would normally hear, but the ratio is the highest on this band than anything because it is the harshest band. And so I want to contain it the most. But I etch out these two numbers right here to sound like they fit in that mid-high well. So that band sounds like this. With the threshold, as you can see, I'm treating it similar to how I treated the low end, to where I'm just compressing the dynamics here. So and on this mode, peak mode, you're going to get, it's going to sound a lot more tactical, I guess you would say. It's going to sound a lot more sharp that way because peak is more of a digital response as opposed to RMS, which is like a gradual, it uses an algorithm to do it. Envelope is, that's something completely different. It detects it. It just, yeah, all right, yeah. Damn, that's actually really clever. I should probably use envelope mode more. Yeah. That's similar to RMS though, but yeah, it seems more like there's more of an algorithm to it. Anyway, high end, same thing. On this song, it happened to be around 7K. Same premise here. My bad, guys. So because this is cutting off, because this is compressing a bit of the high end, I'm assuming that I had the same problem that I did with the mid-lows where there was a lot of presence there, so I had to tame it. But altogether, the before and after is very minuscule. That's really important here to remember. The before and after is very, very minuscule. I'll adjust the output to kind of match what I did there. Since I compressed it would, yeah, probably be about a dB or two higher. So this is the before. And here's the after. Sorry about that, guys. Let's do that. Let's do that again so you can really hear. So here's the before. And here's it after. And now I'm going to listen to it with it on, and then I'm going to turn it off during the drop. Great, so all that's doing really is just containing it a little bit. It's gluing it, as they would say. It's bringing up a lot of the quieter volume, bringing it up, flattening it out, as compressors do. It's really gentle. It's really gentle. It just tightens that shit and makes it sound more like a mastered song. And it's a really subtle thing, that the reason I do that. It's really just to glue it and just tighten it together and make it sound like it's one cohesive track. Right, now here comes the EQing. As you will notice, I use Pro Q2 a lot, but I use Pro Q2 on my master and I use linear phase. It's not really that important unless you're doing razor edge EQing, like really, really refined shit. It's not, and you need things to sound, harmonically congruent. It's really not that important that you use anything besides linear phase low. Just linear phase is what's important, because that's going to keep your low end intact. It's not going to fuck with your low end with phase issues, and it's not going to fuck with your kicks and even snares with phase issues. It's going to keep it intact, and it's low latency, and it's not going to add too much of what's called pre-ringing, which is a reverse feedback kind of effect. Now, I curated this EQ to what fit, just as I usually do, what fits best to a flat response on the Vox&Go Span Master. So this is what it looks like after my EQ job. By the way, preface to this visual here, the low end is going to have a lot more presence, and that is because these two isotope ozone exciters are going to counteract that. So I'm very well aware that the low end is extremely present at this point in the process. But as you can see, even after EQing, we have this huge dip around the 1.5K, and we have a shitload of presence in the low and mid-low. And so that's why you can see this curve here, is this is me trying to kind of fight that into a point to where it still sounds transparent, but not so, abrasive. Like if you overdo that and you really get this into a flat response on here, it'll ruin your mix. It's gonna sound so obvious that there's a fat filter on it. So here's with it. This is gonna be really minuscule, but here's with it before. Let me turn these up, by the way. And this is it after the EQing. Keep in mind, this EQ is also indicative to my reference songs. I was referencing a lot of D&B for this, so D&B doesn't necessarily have like a lot of mid-low. It has a lot of mid-high that's really clean. And then guys, I really, really recommend that you do this little trick where you just add like 2 dB almost up around 14K, because it's that pure like hi-fi modern frequency shit. And it'll really add a lot to your song's presence. I highly recommend that. It adds that shine that you fucking need. So we've EQ'd it, right? Everything's really subtle. I think it was like fucking JJP or like one of those guys, like a really like well-renowned engineer on Pensado's Place, said if you ever have to use an EQ sharper than a 1Q, which kind of is, all these together are kind of like the equivalent of one very large Q, then you're doing something wrong and it's a mix problem. So I really try to keep, a lot of these Qs are around 1, but I really try to keep the curve of my bands like really around 1 or below, with the exceptions of this kind of shit where like I know for a fact that I want to get this broad stroke out in the mid lows, but not to that exact curve. You know, like there are some exceptions there, but generally speaking, try to shoot for broad when you're EQing on a master. This is a little like trick that I like to do. I find the fundamental of the kick and I add 1 dB or 1.5 dB on the master. It's weird, but it seems to just like do this little trick where it'll make your kick thump a certain way that you just can't do any other way. I don't know. It's a great little trick if you're having trouble with making your kick just punch through. So EQing's done. I cut off at 20K. You can't hear above that, and I cut off at 31K, or I mean 31 hertz. So, all right, moving on to this is where like that special sauce comes, and probably what this entire little tutorial has been leading up to. This is the mid-side exciting, and this is like my sauce, that like special secret shit. Okay, so here we go. I'm using Ozone 7's exciter. Like, I really use the same shit most people do. There's not really, I don't have any weird ones besides some wave stuff, and even still, like, a lot of people use that wave shit. So, we have here Ozone 7. I have the individual, like, exciter module, and I put it on mid-side mode. That's very important here. And I use tape for both. I'm just a really big fan of tape as it's like odd harmonics and it just fits really well. It doesn't sound like you're like blasting headroom, which I feel like you do with tube. So it's nice and warm and transparent. So here we go. I never excite the low end. That's important. If I want harmonics in my low end, I synthesize them exactly with like binary modes on synths. Like you can do this with operator by drawing them in with a pen tool. You can draw in the harmonics or serum on binary mode. I don't fucking excite the low end, man. There's like these, it's like if you didn't do it right in the mix, then you're kind of fucked. But like if the goal really here should be to get it perfectly in the mix as far as what harmonics work best out of speakers. Like generally that looks like a slope down. You have your fundamental, then the second harmonic is a little bit less, third harmonic a little bit less than that, and then that's it. I have a tutorial covering that. But essentially that's how your low end should be tailored exactly as clean and as raw as possible in the mix. In my opinion, that's just what works the best for me, is the cleanest like that. And then I don't saturate that shit at all whatsoever in my master process. The closest I do is compress the punch of the kick a little bit. Now, moving on, that's why I have so much presence in the low end beforehand going into this. So I can counteract this with these. So I look at the spectrum before and we have some holes. Mainly in the mid-range, right? So I do the same thing with the exciter. I carve out these bands to be about where they should fit, and then I solo the mid, and then I listen to it, and I use these as essentially EQs because they're a lot more transparent than an EQ. See, now we're starting to read a little bit more flat, and that's just on the mid-range. I've done all that I can really to bring that mid out without sounding too fucked up, and this has worked really tremendously for that. In this case, generally my curves don't look like this. Like a lot of times I'll be like more like that, I'll have a lot less in the mid-high, but on this song it was really crucial to get that kind of presence that I felt I need out of it, right? So I work this like an EQ, and they generally land around 5 dB. Mix always at 100. I'm not trying to use parallel because unless like that shit is coded perfect, it can possibly give you phase issues. Where are we at with time right now? 20 minutes in. Okay, now same thing with the side. Now what you'll find immediately when you listen to the side, you're gonna solo it, listen to it, and you're gonna wonder how the fuck you do anything with that because you get essentially audio nonsense. It sounds like this. Right, and it never sounds present, it never sounds clear because it's side and your brain can't distinguish, like you're hearing two different things out of each ear, technically, to the zeros and ones. So like your brain can't really distinguish why it sounds different, but it's just not there. So what I do is I phase the left. And so really you're just like kind of listening to the equivalent of one side, but out of both speakers, you're like monoing like one channel, you know, and that way it sounds present enough to work with it. So this sounds like this. Now, in this case, it becomes really obvious, like, that we're missing a lot in the mid-high. Like, I instinctively want to bring this so much higher. Like, I want it up here. You know, I want to give it, like, 2 dB even more from where I had it. But, you know, I'm just going to keep this how it originally was mastered. With this song, when I had produced it, there was just so much mid-low, so I really, really wasn't doing much there. A lot of times you can give a lot of exciting to the mid-low on the side if you want, because it really adds that deep, deep, huge re-sound. It's like you're not supposed to, but by all means, you know, fuck it. This is 2019. So when we unsolo that, the difference is substantial, guys. Like, here's it before. Sorry, guys, left his face. So here's it before all of the mid-side exciting. And here's it after. You're like, holy shit, my song just came out of the mud. What the fuck? And it's wider and it's more present. This is great. That's the benefit of doing the mid-side, is when they're treated differently, it kind of like gives it just widens that shit. I mean, that's what it is, you know what I mean? It gives you this like special priority to the side that, like, I don't know, it's just sick in my opinion. It sounds so much more polished and huge than if you treat them as like a broadband thing, in my opinion. So we've done the mid-side exciting. The reason I have a second one of these is because of those potholes, right? I told you before, I wanted to give more priority to the mid-range, but I couldn't figure out how. So in this case, and I do this on a lot of my songs, I do a tube. The reason I do tube is because it's the other harmonics that aren't tape. It's like even harmonics. You have tape is odd harmonics, tube is even harmonics, I believe. And so these are adding different harmonics, but also saturating. So I use a tube saturation to fill out the potholes. It's like adding more shit in between the harmonics that you're adding, right? And I use that to fill out the potholes. We had one around the mid-range, so here we go. I used it to do this. I do not do mid-side for this. I do broad because this is essentially a transparent EQ. That's really that missing hole that we couldn't fill without things sounding really fucked up. So this is it before. And this is it after. Some of you may say that the one before sounded better sonically, but the thing is you want to fill those frequencies the best you can, because different speakers have different responses. Like what sounds good on my system might not sound good on a shitty car stereo. So you need this like flat response. You need everything to be present all across the board for systems that have more priorities in different zones, you know? I'll give you a before and after mid-listen so you can really hear what's going on here. Here's the before. Sorry, guys. So I'm just going to play it through and I'm just going to flick these on. So. Damn, now you can really hear how it filled out, how it's very full now, very present. And now we get to limiting, right? That's all I really do before limiting. And I keep an eye on my spectrum analyzer too this whole time. It's pretty important. So things are about to get really loud here, by the way. So bear with me. I guess my voice has been pretty loud this whole time too, so it's probably gonna start matching my voice. So this is where limiting comes in. With Invisible Limiter, which is by far my favorite limiter. Trust me guys, I have sat and done the A and B comparison with every major limiter that people use including Pro L. Yeah, including Pro L. And AOM is crushing everything with all the settings. Like I've spent like 3 hours on this project where I was like sitting there with Vintage Limiter, Ozone's Vintage, Pro L, all the settings, even Sausage Fattener, like fucking everything, even like Saturator on soft clip mode, everything. This sounds the best to me. So I go clip mode, and then I will oversample 16 times before I bounce. And depending on the song, I'll go linear or logarithmic. What these do, logarithmic is like a pad. It's like an open, clear. You want large perception. Linear is in your face. And on this song, I want in your face. So let's go to limiting, and I just push it as hard as I can. I just do one limiter. If I wanted to go aggressively loud, if I wanted to like flex on people and play the loudness war game, I would use 2 limiters. But frankly, I just don't like doing that. It like crushes the fuck out of your dynamics. And so I just like one limiter. I just play, I play by the rules in that sense. So here we go. It's gonna get loud. Now, when I'm using the limiter, what I start to look at is this right here. I start to look at the output of Ableton, because the RMS, the like thicker green as opposed to the peak, the thicker green bar is kind of where your luffs are at per se. That's where like your general like girth of the song is. Now, when that gets to 0, that's when it starts really clipping audibly. And so I just like to see like how hard I can push it. So let's do this from scratch and kind of find a good balance. That's about where it's at. I think it was like 14.5 when I did the final, but that's where it's at before it starts to get really ugly. As you notice, I had to turn on that utility to give it 4 dB extra boost beforehand. The utility doesn't have the DC or any of that on. DC would cause like phase issues because it's non-linear, whatever. So it doesn't have any of that on. It's just the utility. And I just had to turn it up because there just wasn't enough gain there to really push it where I wanted it to go. But this is where I'm happy, where it's not too brutalized and it's sounding all right. And then I'm not going to do this because it'll immediately overload my sound card and like this whole video will be fucked up. But what I would do is put this on oversampling 16 times. And then I would go into Ozone, both the soft clippers or both the saturator exciters, and I would put oversampling on there, put the exciter on digital, which is linear. I do that for both of these. It's in that settings right there. Put that oversampling on too. Put the exciter on digital, and then just for final measure, just double check that my multiband compressor is also, it would be on digital, right? So it goes digital, digital, digital on everything Ozone, and then oversampling on the exciters, and then oversampling all the way to 16 on the limiter, and you fucking export that bitch and you call it a fucking day. So you have this, if you guys are, let's go back to OBS. If you guys want to experiment with exactly what I did there, you have the mix down file, you have the mix and master session file right there. You can also look extensively at the mix down. Feel free to literally like take that chain, save it as a preset, put it in yours, tweak it, do your own chain. Maybe your chain is better. Maybe yours sounds better. Totally could. I'm not the best engineer in the world, but I would like to consider myself as a good one. And I'm happy with my engineering. And I hope you are too, using my engineering. So, I'm trying to think of news. I don't really have anything. I'm working on the next release right now, but I'm also working on a bunch of other shit and secretly this big project that I'll announce way later. I guess just stay tuned. I'm always trying to get more I'm integrating my Patreon to my Discord, so everyone here on Patreon can go to my Discord. I'll attach the link in the description of this tutorial. Everyone on my Patreon can go to my Discord, and there will be a certain channel for you if you guys aren't added. Actually, when you first show up, just tag me at Levitate on the Discord and say, please add me to the Patreon channel. I'll check that you're good to go, and then I'll add you in there, or add you, whatever the fuck. I'm not that good with Discord, but you know what I'm saying, as a patron dude on my Discord. And then what you can do from there is you can ask me questions personally about your music. You can send me your songs, ask for critiques, what I would change, that kind of thing. Hit me with ideas for tutorials, please, because I'm constantly out of ideas for tutorials. Please do that. And anything you'd like to see on my Patreon, let me know in there or the comments here. Stay active, tell your friends. I'm gonna start promoting my Patreon again because I am pretty comfy with it nowadays. So anyway, without further ado, that is a half an hour. I'm sorry for being so wordy, but I hope you guys got everything up here. So yeah, without further ado, I will see you on the next one. Peace.